Greetings from the garden. My name is Ben, and today we're going to look at getting started growing in containers. So let's jump into the garden and get started. Growing in containers is great if you're working in a small space, or maybe you have a balcony or a patio in an apartment. It's important to remember before we get started that what goes up must also come down. Right now, all of our materials are separate, they're dry, but once we assemble our container, this one piece will become much heavier and a little more difficult to move. So if your lease is up middle of the summer or you have to move at some point, just bear that in mind as you are choosing which containers to bring up, that it will be much heavier than it is when you buy it from the garden center. Here's what you'll need. You'll need your container with the drainage hole in the bottom. You'll need a big either stone or a broken piece of pottery that you can put over that hole. You'll need some gravel that's at least 1 inch diameter to fill the bottom of your pot to help with drainage, and then you'll need your soil. Let's start by talking about soil. Growing in containers is not the same as growing in the ground in your yard. So you can't just go out and dig some soil up from your yard and put it in your container. What you need to get is true potting soil or container soil sold at your garden center. So it'll look something like this. It'll be fairly light and airy, and it will probably have some of these little flecks in it, and that's perlite. And that'll help to reduce soil compaction as you water and as the plants grow into place over the course of the growing season. It should be pre-moistened so that it sets your new plants up for success. If their tiny little roots dry out, they will not be happy. You will be shocked at how much water it takes to actually get your soil to the right consistency. It typically will take quite a few additions with mixing in between until when you pick up a handful of soil and squeeze it, it should hold its form and not fall apart easily. If it still falls apart or you shake your hand just a bit and it crumbles, add a bit more water. Our next point to set you up for success is thinking about drainage. So we want to make sure that our plant roots, as they grow down through the soil, don't sit in standing water. Again, whatever pot you buy, make sure it has a drainage hole, but a lot of these drainage holes can be fairly large, and you also don't want to lose soil through that. So we're going to begin by taking this old piece of stone. Again, you can use a piece of broken pottery or an old pot that's broken, anything that isn't totally flat that will block water from coming out. But again, this is so irregular that as I turn it upside down and place it in the bottom of the pot, it'll allow water to flow underneath it without allowing so much soil to flow out as well. The next thing we're going to add in is our gravel, and we only need about 1 inch or 2 layer of gravel on the bottom of the pot. We don't need to fill it up very much, and again, this is just to assist with drainage as water percolates through. Our final step is to add the soil. Now, of course, we already have our soil pre-moistened. This is not rocket science. We're just going to dump it in. Another important tip, we don't want to fill the soil all the way up to the very top of the container, because you will find as you start to water, you want a little bit of a gap so that that water can collect on the surface and filter down. If the soil is filled right to the top, your soil and your water will run off to the sides and it won't get into the soil where it needs to be. Our container is now ready for planting. A final tip for success is to think about the amount of light that your container will get throughout the day. Optimally, we're looking for at least 4 hours of direct sun. If your space gets less than that, consider maybe joining a community garden plot or gardening with a neighbor. Well, we hope you saw how easy it was to get started with prepping your container. Next time, we'll look at actually planting your container. We look forward to seeing you then, and thanks for joining us. Happy gardening. Containers are a great option for growing if maybe you're working in a smaller space like a deck or a patio. The great news about them is that you can totally customize them to fit what it is you want to grow. So based on the type of soil that you add and where you place them, either getting more sun or less, can really influence what you're able to produce. For us today, we're going to pot up an herb container with a few flowers added in for some extra beauty. And the great news is that not only are these ingredients for cooking, but they double as cocktail ingredients. Three words to keep in mind when designing your containers: thriller, spiller, and filler. Thrillers are those super cool plants that really make a statement. These are the lead characters in your container's dramatic design. Spillers will trail over the side and help to maximize your growing space. Fillers, well, you get the idea. Think of these plants as the ensemble or supporting cast. And so we're going to use transplants in this case because they allow us to see our design much more quickly and give us some instant gratification so that we don't have to wait more time for the seeds to come through and give us a real impact. So we're going to start by laying out our thrillers first. And again, these form the backbone of our design. And so we want to put them in first so we really know that they're anchoring our planting. So in this case, these black petunias are going to act as our thrillers. And the good news is because they trail, they're also acting as spillers. They're going to trail over the sides a bit as the season goes along. We also have some lantana here, which is another spiller for us, or thriller. It's subjective. You're the designer. You make the call ultimately. But again, that contrast is great between sort of the golden yellow of the lantana and the black of the petunia. And so again, we're doing these all along the outside exterior because again, we want them to trail over the sides. We don't want to plant these in the middle. Once we have this sort of backbone infrastructure in place, then we can move on to our fillers. We're going to start with our herbs first because these are all sort of different and they have a little bit of a different look to all of them. And we're going to do these marigolds last. So we have a collection of 3 different mints here that we're going to include. There is a chocolate mint, a spearmint, and a pineapple mint. And I mentioned cocktails earlier, so take notes. Remember that this is something you want to harvest these, so make sure that they're easily accessible. Again, putting them all right in the center might not make the most sense. So I'm going to stagger a few just along the outsides, nudged in between my spillers. And then I'm going to start with this bronze fennel, and I'm going to do more of these towards the center because I know they're going to get a bit taller based on the information on my plant tag. Also, this nice ferny contrast ties into the color of the petunias really nicely and the gold of the lantana. Finally, I have sort of a lone lavender here. Again, lavender in cocktails is really fun. I'm just going to stick it wherever I want. There feels great. Finally, I'm going to fill in the extra space with my fillers. Again, these are the marigolds. And so this is anywhere you have some gaps showing through. We're just going to nudge these right into place to complete the design. Now, this is a great time to pause, step back from your container, walk it around it a few times, and really think about, is this the design that you want? Does this feel good to you? If it doesn't, again, it's really easy to move things around right now because everything is still in pots. Much easier than it will be when everything is planted. Finally, before you actually start putting plants in the ground, make sure that your pots are moist, your transplants here, but also make sure your soil in your container is moist. Putting a wet plant into dry soil can harm the roots, and we want to set these plants up for success as much as we can. As you can see, I'm planting each plant one at a time, and this is so I don't lose my design. I can just use my hands to dig holes. I really don't need any special tools here. Herbs like hot, sunny, and dry environments. And so we've chosen plants like the lantana, the petunias, and the marigolds that will also enjoy those conditions. If you are growing herbs in a bit of shade, that's okay. Just know that they may not grow as big for you, but they will grow. Make sure as you're planting that you leave a little room between the top of your pot and the base of your soil in the pot. This will help you a lot when it comes to start watering later in the season. If your soil is filled too high, the water will run out and not soak in like it should. Well, there you have it. Our container garden is ready to go. If you want, you can harvest a few leaves from some of your new herbs like this mint, make a cocktail to celebrate your achievement, but otherwise, this is set to go. The final thing we need to do, as always, is to give it a little bit of drink of water, and this will help to set everything up for success to have a beautiful season. So thank you for joining us in the garden today, and we will see you next time. Greetings from the garden. My name is Ben, and today we're going to look at when and how to water your garden and look at some water-saving tips. So let's jump into the garden and we'll get started. Our goal as gardeners is to moderate soil moisture as much as we can. We don't want it to fluctuate too rapidly because our plants won't appreciate being too wet or too dry too often. But before we look at when and how to water, let's look at a few water-saving tips. First, adding and mixing compost into your soil will help it retain more water, in addition to providing a boost of nutrients. The best time to add compost is in spring before planting or in fall as you're putting your garden to bed for the winter. Second, adding mulch like straw or chopped leaves will help insulate your soil and prevent it from drying out as quickly during the summer. An added bonus, mulching also helps keep weeds down. Third, you can install a rain barrel to capture and reuse rainwater. Or consider using a soaker hose, which uses less water and applies it right to the plant's roots. Almost nothing is lost to evaporation. How do we know when we need to water? Well, you'll want to start by making a habit of observing your soil, especially the top 1 to 2 inches. Think of your soil like the crust of bread. The outer layer may be dry, but right inside may be moist. To more accurately observe your soil's moisture, using your finger, make a narrow trench about 2 inches deep. If the soil is lighter colored or dusty below 2 inches, it's time to water. If the soil is darker colored, moist, and not dusty, then you can hold off for another day or two. So let's imagine our soil is dry. How much water should we add? There are different ways to water, and ideally, we want to provide the equivalent of 1 inch of rain directly to the soil. Simply getting the leaves wet won't cut it. First, before you break out the hose or watering can, check the forecast. If rain is predicted within the next 24 hours, consider waiting, and Mother Nature may do the work for you. However, if your plants are already wilting and the chance of rain is below 50%, it's better to be safe than sorry and add water as soon as you can. Second, avoid watering during the hottest part of the day if you can. Water can act like a magnifying glass and actually intensifies hot summer sun and can harm your plants. You'll also lose more water to evaporation during the afternoon. Watering in the morning or evening are your best options. If you're growing in a container, the same 1 inch rule still applies, because containers can dry out more quickly than when you're growing in the ground. It's a good idea to add water to your container until there's about 1 inch of standing water on top of the soil. Wait 3 to 5 minutes for it to soak in, and then water again. This will help to ensure your container is thoroughly and evenly moist. Well, sprinklers are one option for watering our garden, but remember your water bill also, and that no 2 sprinklers are the same. We don't want to waste water if we can help it. Remember, our goal is 1 inch of rainfall each time we water. An easy way to test this is to set an open and clean tuna can or something similar out in your garden. Pay attention to how long it takes to fill up the first time you use a sprinkler. You don't need to buy a rain gauge for this experiment. Well, there you have it. Now you know the basics for keeping your garden watered and happy, and following these tips will help your garden thrive. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the garden next time. Greetings from the garden. My name is Ben, and today we're going to look at chemical-free methods to help keep weeds under control. Let's jump into the garden and we'll get started. First things first, let's get to know a little bit about these plants that we refer to as weeds. It's important to realize that weeds have a really important ecological role to play. They're the first to respond when there's been a major disruption in a natural system, something like a flood or a wildfire or other sort of major event. They help to stabilize a system so that greater plant diversity and wildlife diversity can return. Weeds aren't out to get you or harm you or your garden in any way. Weeds will only grow where light reaches bare soil. There are literally thousands of seeds waiting dormant in your soil, what we refer to as a seed bank. As soon as bare soil is exposed, weeds will germinate and grow. New weed seeds arrive all the time too. They're carried on the wind, dropped by birds, or fall from a mature weed we might have missed. Anytime you turn the soil through planting, cultivating, or pulling weeds, you bring new seeds to the surface. So, if it all comes down to light, that means we have 2 main goals as gardeners. The first is to limit the amount of light that reaches our soil surface, and the second is to try and reduce soil disturbance as much as possible. And there's a few ways that we can go about doing this. First, we're going to look at mulching. When our veggie plants are small and just getting started, we can mulch around them to cover the soil. Avoid heavy mulches like bark and wood chips. Try to use mulches like seed-free straw or chopped up brown leaves. You can also use grass clippings, but only if your lawn is chemical-free too. Spread mulch no deeper than 2 to 3 inches. Make sure you don't bury any new transplants. Within a month or so, mulch will settle to about 1 inch. By the end of the season, it will almost entirely decompose and disappear, feeding your soil in the process. Next, when you do have weeds, it's important to know what to pull, because we want to minimize soil disturbance as much as we can. There are 2 types of weeds we have to deal with, annuals and perennials. Annual weeds will complete their entire life cycle in 1 season and will produce seeds as quickly as possible. Annuals don't invest much energy in their root systems. Don't pull annual weeds unless you must. Pulling annual weeds only disturbs the soil and brings new weed seeds to the surface. Instead, try cutting the plant off at the base near the ground before it flowers and produces seed. The remainder of the plant will decompose in the ground. Some common annual weeds you might encounter include purslane, lamb's quarters, pennycress, and ragweed. Perennial weeds are more resilient, investing energy and time in bigger root systems for the long haul. Perennial weeds, well, they require a bit more work. You need to remove the entire plant, including the roots, in order to keep perennial weeds under control. Common perennial weeds include quackgrass, dandelion, and curly dock. So another method we can use, and hear me out, this is going to sound a little counterintuitive to everything we've just said, but you can also cultivate your soil with something like a cultivator. Cultivating is a great method to use if either you can't get access to mulch or if you have a ton of baby weed seedlings that are just a couple of inches tall and it isn't practical to pull or cut all of them. When cultivating, disturb the top 1 to 2 inches of soil, and this will prevent weed seedlings from gaining a foothold. So a final tip for success, vigilance is key, and this probably comes as no surprise. You'll be amazed at how quickly weeds grow in your garden over the summer, especially after a good summer rain. So spending even 15 to 30 minutes in your garden per week just to stay on top of things can make a huge difference. Well, there you have it. I hope you understand now a little bit more about these plants we refer to as weeds, and also realize that if you have them, nature is trying to tell you something. Our job as gardeners is to create as stable a system as possible. So with that in mind, happy gardening, and we'll see you next time. Greetings from the garden. My name is Ben, and today we're going to look at critter-proofing your garden. Wildlife is wonderful, but not really when it's eating the lettuce you just planted. So let's jump into the garden and we'll get started. First things first, let's keep it real. There is no such thing as a 100% critter-proof garden short of building a bunker, and that's not realistic for any of us. The best that we can do is critter-proof against those critters that will do the most damage based on where we're growing. So if you're growing in the ground, that might be something like rabbits, or if you're growing in containers, that might be something like chipmunks or squirrels. Here's what you'll need. If you're growing in the soil, we're looking for rabbit fencing, which is about 18 to 24 inches high, and a few bamboo stakes. If you're growing in containers, a little cayenne pepper is all you'll need. Quick tip before you get started. A lot of you may already have fencing like this, which is chain link fence, in your yard. It's important to note that this is not rabbit proof. The small guys can slip right through here. We really want something like this, which is true rabbit fencing, and you can notice the size of the holes between the wire is much smaller. So here we are in our new garden space. You can see I've already put our stakes into the ground. They're spaced about 18 to 24 inches apart. This is not an exact science. You don't need to get out the measuring stick. But what is important to note is we're doing this critter proofing and installing the fencing before we plant, because you don't want to run the risk of stepping on your new seedlings or your plant babies. We want to keep them as protected as possible. Quick math tip. Before you head to the garden center, make sure you know how much fencing you'll need to buy. As a reminder, to figure out your perimeter, we need the length times the width. In our case, we're doing a 5 by 10 foot bed. 5 times 10 is 50, so we will need 50 linear feet of fencing. You can see I'm threading the stakes through the fence, and this just helps to keep the fence in place throughout the growing season. I'm also making sure that the fence connects with the ground, because any gap between the fence and the soil is a place where a rabbit could sneak through. Your garden is now critter-proofed and ready for planting. But what if you're planting in containers? Critter-proofing your containers is a cinch. All you'll need is this common household spice, cayenne pepper. You'll just want to do a light dusting over the soil surface. Make sure there isn't a breeze when you do it, because you don't want it to blow back in your face. But the reason we do this is because the critters that are most likely to dig into our soil are things like squirrels and chipmunks when we're working in containers. They use their nose to decide where they're going to dig, and if they get a face full of cayenne pepper, they're never coming back. Also, don't worry, the pepper won't harm your plants or change the flavor of any of your produce. So we hope you see how easy it is to get started with critter-proofing your garden space, whether you're growing in the ground or in a container. And we'll see you next time, and happy gardening. Greetings from the garden. My name is Ben, and today we're going to talk about how to improve your garden for next year by observing your garden this year. So let's jump into the garden and we'll get started. Many experienced gardeners find it helpful to keep notes and to refer back to them when they're planning their gardens for next year. So it's important to realize there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's really about what works best for you. A notebook is one of the simplest ways, but you can also use your smartphone camera or your social media timeline and refer back to those photos to remind yourself of what was going on and what was working or not working. All you'll need is a pen and paper, maybe a camera, and your eyes. When observing your garden, take as much time as you can to focus on the basics. Does it feel like your plants have enough space to grow and succeed? Do you notice changes in the soil or in the plants themselves? Try especially to focus on changes from one day to the next, and this will help you catch problems before they become catastrophes. But also, take time to appreciate the beauty of your fruits, the color and shapes of the leaves, and any lingering insects, good and bad, or anything else that might catch your eye. So what else should you be looking for? Well, ask yourself. What could use some extra attention? Is anything drooping, bent, or broken? Do you need to make any immediate changes like pruning, deadheading, or weeding? If you were to do something differently next year, what would it be and why? Well, there you have it. It's never too late to begin observing your garden and also to realize that pausing and observing helps to not only make your garden better, but also makes you a better gardener. So, happy gardening, and we'll see you next time. Greetings from the garden. My name is Ben, and today we're going to look back at how things went in our gardens this year. So, let's jump in and get started. Well, this is our final episode of our first season of Let's Grow Stuff. And again, that's why we're looking back to look at what went well for us, but also maybe what were some misses from the show and in our gardening season as a whole. Because remember, gardening is always about experimenting and learning and trialing things and improving for future years to come. So with that in mind, let's look at how this year went for us. What was gardening like for us this year? Well, as always, weather keeps us on our toes, and with climate change, it continues to be a wild card from year to year. Weather and climate can impact everything from our yields to how often we need to water and the type and severity of pests and diseases we might find. We started this season with a lot of rain and cooler temperatures, which was great for crops that like these conditions, including things like greens and peas. As a result, veggies that need high heat to thrive, such as tomatoes, peppers, and squash, got a bit of a slower start. But we made up for any lost time in July when temperatures spiked and stayed high for weeks. So while we can't control the weather, we can control our response to it. And we can also do our part to mitigate our contribution to further climate change. By growing our own food, we're adding resiliency to the food system. When we compost, we're keeping organic material out of landfills. When we manage our gardens organically, we're encouraging beneficial insects and pollinators. When we water smarter, based on weather forecasts and utilizing water-saving tips, we are helping to preserve clean water supplies for future generations. If this was your first season gardening, I hope you realize that one of the pure joys of gardening is that there is so much to learn, and that you can always make changes and improvements for next year. Take, for example, the varieties of vegetables you chose to plant. Did you like the flavor? If not, choose a different variety next year. Or did the varieties you chose succumb to pests or diseases? Well, there may be a disease-resistant cultivar out there, and you could try growing it next year. So we've done our best to share our ideas and experiences and tips for success. But the important thing to remember is that even if it doesn't work the first time, or the second time, or maybe even the third time, keep trying and keep learning and experimenting along the way. And if you think the pros get it right every time, well, just check out some of these bloopers from this season of filming. But vigilance is key. Even... So there's a lot more to insects than we might realize. So until next time, happy gardening. Hope you got that on camera. Well, of course you did.
You can do it too.
Happy gardening, and we'll see you next time.